Demiurge has a lot more pieces in play than we might think. We didn't know Caspond was his inside man until the end of the movie, but in addition to him, there's also all the leaders of the demi-humans. Strategic figureheads and battle-hardened veterans, each powerful in their own right. Without them, the demi-humans wouldn't be able to move in the coordinated way we see in the movie, since this is after all a force of over 100,000 he's dealing with. Massive numbers that needed to be split for various tasks across the Holy Kingdom. So, though it may not have seemed like it, it's them and Caspond whose coordinated efforts are seeing Demiurge's plans through right now. They don't even know they're working in tandem, but it's rather interesting to see pieces on both sides playing a role to make a bigger picture they're not even aware of. So it's those plans we're going to talk about here, as well as the more lore-heavy details behind the strongest demi-humans themselves. But first, I know you're all familiar with Starforge and their amazing Frieren and Kaiju No. 8 PC builds, but this new one is by far their coolest build yet. I didn't think it was possible for them to get better, but when I saw for the first time this stunning solo leveling build, I was super hyped to be able to share it with you. So, this video is sponsored by my friends over at Starforge, bringing us one of the most incredible anime PC collaborations to date. It's a high-end gaming rig featuring quality designs and features you won't find anywhere else. You've got the UV print permanently baked right onto the case itself, swappable plate lights featuring each of Sung's iconic shadows, then bundles including matching desk mats and durable acrylic wall arts. For me though, I just can't get over how awesome this case looks. It's a piece you can get all on its own, so if you like the design with Sung aura farming, Igris doing an action pose, and Beru coming out of the red gate, getting it by itself is always an option too. I'm definitely going to be using this as the case for my next build. So, whether it's the case, the full bundle, or some of the accessories, you can check the full offering of this solo leveling collaboration using my link down in the description. That's starforgepc.com/AniNews. And with Starforge's Black Friday sale going on as well, there's plenty of discounts to be found on everything. Great deals like 20% off on the desk mats. But anyway, Part 13, Pawns and Plans. Ainz's conversation with Caspond went on much longer than what we saw, delving into how it was he survived all this. Turns out a certain Baron had helped him, and it was that Baron that was now in a deep sleep. Some non-fatal wounds left him physically drained, and this deep sleep was just a state of recovery. Caspond wanted the priests to help him recover faster, but with their mana essential in the efforts to come later, Remedios insisted they conserve it for more important matters. Now, this whole interaction is rather intriguing since it makes you wonder how much of it is the truth. Considering how we know Caspond is a doppelganger requested specifically from Demiurge, where and when then did this shapeshifter take the place of the real Caspond? Was it while being taken care of by the Baron, or was it long before that Demiurge replaced him? Either way, perhaps this deep sleep might not be as natural as you might think. Still, Gustav would accept Caspond's request for this Baron to be taken care of, moving the conversation forward onto a more pressing issue. You see, just like how Ainz was asking about seeing through transformations earlier, he would do so again now with Caspond. He wanted to know if anyone in the region could see through them. Caspond would immediately question Ainz's intent, leading to the explanation that they needed to be on guard for demons lurking amongst the prisoners. So, with that being reason enough, Gustav would mention how he didn't know anyone with those abilities. It was an answer which would put Ainz into a deep contemplation, leading Caspond to ask Remedios next. Not only that, considering how important such a topic seemed to Ainz, Caspond insisted Remedios swear to the gods that she not know anyone. It was after Remedios and Gustav did so that the only other person Caspond could ask was Nea. We already knew her answer, but what was more surprising was the fact Caspond even knew who she was. As it turns out, it was only natural he be aware of the person taking care of the Sorcerer King. This led Ainz to compliment her services, and he would even say how he wished he had a squire like her. They were words that, as you'd expect, left Nea shocked. Yet another excuse to admire Ainz even more now. It was after that Caspond would ask more about these demons, wanting to know what about their transformations they needed to look out for. Well, according to Ainz, while demons were able to transform into a human, they weren't able to turn into someone specific. What that means is that they can't model their faces after someone else's. All they can do is turn human and hope to blend in that way. So, if amongst the prisoners there was one that no one recognized, then that was a person Ainz suggested keeping an eye on. If a demon was using illusion instead though, then that would make things a bit more complicated, specifically because an illusion could replicate anybody's face. It just couldn't replicate their clothes, voice, or memories. Ainz would demonstrate this by transforming his face into Caspond's, identifying it as a low-level illusion spell easily dispelled by just talking. Like, a few questions towards a suspected illusionist should be more than enough to determine whether they're fake or real. So, with that being everything they needed to look out for demons, Caspond would send the paladins off to investigate. He would then discuss the plan he wanted to proceed with, pretty much halting the liberation plan Ainz came up with. You see, rather than go camp to camp and build their army that way, Caspond intended to flee south and get the army from there to help. He didn't want to risk moving deeper into enemy territory, as traveling with an army this big was way too noticeable. As Caspond himself put it, he wanted to avoid losing more lives as a result of trying to save people. Ainz would then suggest continuing raiding the camps with the groups they had now, an idea Caspond would refer to Remedios for an opinion on. She would agree retreating south was best, but she would also express her concerns of retaliation. Like, what would they do if Yaldabaoth came and retook the city? Caspond replied simply with nothing, stating how he didn't want to risk the potential tens of thousands of death that would come from trying to retake this territory. It was a rather shocking statement for all who heard it. Reason being that the way Caspond acted now was far different from how he was before. According to Remedios, he was apparently far more kind-hearted when it came to the people, certainly not cold enough to just abandon them like this. Remedios' disappointment would then spur an even more surprising reaction, a warped expression no one knew Caspond was even capable of. His lips twisted and his gaze sharpened, almost as if to ridicule the notion of saving anyone in the first place. As the way he himself put it, had anyone else experienced the same hell he did, then there was no doubt their personality would have changed too. He was suggesting that the torture the demons put him through was so terrible that it was better to just escape than risk being captured again. So, it was clear the paladins hadn't heard what the demons did to them, so he suggested they go and ask the prisoners. Only after would they ever be able to understand what it was Caspond had gone through. Well, supposedly. It was then that Caspond would state his desire to kill all the demi-humans, a proposal Ainz wasn't entirely against so long as he was able to interrogate them first. The orcs, however, were off limits as they were a group Ainz already took the trouble of freeing. It was an outcome Caspond found to be unfortunate, but didn't fault Ainz for since they went through the same horrors he did. Surprisingly, he would ask if Ainz would turn them over in exchange for a holy sword, an offer most casters would find useless. This was the reason Ainz would decline it himself, but I'm sure the idea of receiving Remedios' sword was at least enticing. For Remedios though, she wasn't entertained in the slightest. Though the question was framed like a joke, it was clear Caspond was very much serious. It made Nea wonder what he could have possibly gone through to make him hate even the imprisoned demi-humans. What was it that spurred a hate strong enough to give away even a royal treasure? Ainz would then ask if Caspond was gonna abandon the city, an option he wasn't yet certain of. He was currently of the mindset that if Ainz could stay another week, then they could at least survive long enough to heal the liberated prisoners and send a messenger south. A request Caspond wouldn't make without first offering Ainz even more rewards. So, it was after Ainz accepted and left the room with Nea that Caspond and the others would then move on to the main topic. A topic the paladins assumed was how to travel safely to the south with everyone, but Caspond, however, had other plans. Contrary to what he said before, Caspond actually had no intent of retreating south. He fully intended to clash with Yaldabaoth's army here in the city. Remedios would immediately call out the folly in doing so, since while yes they did have walls fortifying their borders, a location like this could easily be surrounded and starved. To her, it was foolish to fight a siege-style battle without reinforcements. All the demi-humans had to do was block every exit, then after that was simply a matter of waiting. Even so, Caspond would insist they had to fight here anyway. For the very reason we saw in the movie, Caspond couldn't have Ainz defeat Yaldabaoth then head back to his own nation. He needed him to cull the forces of the demi-humans first. The only way to do that was to force him, which, although broke the very promise the paladins made with Ainz earlier, the end result more than justified the means. If taking advantage of Ainz resulted in less Holy Kingdom subjects having to be sacrificed, then Caspond had no problem choosing the lives of his people over a promise to an undead. All he needed was a good reason to break the promise. So, by taking too long in the preparations to head south, there was no doubt Yaldabaoth's army would come to attack, and by then Ainz would have no choice but to fight against the armies surrounding them. It was the most valid excuse one could use to ask for his help. The only problem was the mana he'd spend fighting against the demi-humans, putting him at a disadvantage in his fight against Yaldabaoth. That, however, wasn't very big of an issue to them, since as Remedios' sister once said in the past, mana didn't take that long to recover. As words that came from a well-renowned priest high up in the ranks, there wasn't any reason to think this wasn't the case for every spellcaster. So, with no one objecting to the plan and the outcome sure to stem from it, Caspond would lure Yaldabaoth's army by letting a few demi-humans escape. So long as the attackers showed up before they ran out of food, then him and the others knew they had nothing to worry about. Sure, their numbers may be up there approaching 100,000, but so long as they prepared for that, they knew that they'd be ready. As for what monsters Yaldabaoth's army consisted of, there were 12 races constituting the core army, then another 6 backing them up. There were the Snakemen, Armats and Cavan, the Zeren, Bladers and Horerunners, the Spittin, Stone-Eaters and Orthrouses, then the Magaroses, Terraposes, and the Boofolk. All of them we actually saw in the movie, and there were even small bits of lore attached to them. The Snakemen were the distant relatives of Lizardmen, while the Armats had fur-like steel and were relatives to the Kuagoa. Cavan were ape-like creatures eyeless due to atrophy, while Zeren were a slimy race with upper bodies like eels and lower bodies like maggots. Bladers had innate blades and an armor-like exoskeleton, while Horerunners were known for sprinting. Spittin spat thread hard as steel, useful for making garments, while Stone-Eaters turned rocks they ate into incredibly dangerous high-speed projectiles. Orthrouses were stronger variants of Horerunners but didn't move quite as fast, while Magaroses had the innate ability to cast spells up to the 4th tier. What's interesting about them in particular is that their tattoos actually represented the type of magic they were capable of. And the stronger you were, the more likely it was to be covered by them head to toe. So they specifically were quite the formidable enemy. Terraposes were demi-humans capable of flight, but only for a short while as it did take up quite a bit of energy. Finally, there was also the Bowfolk, but we already saw exactly what they were capable of. When it comes to the other 6 supporting races, these were the groups who had members that were strong individually or just didn't like to cooperate with others. There were the Ogres, who we've seen time and time before, the Priam, who while similar to the Ogres possessed control over the earth, the Va'um, who possessed control over water, the Nagarahas, totally different from Naga, the Spriggans, who could change their size at will, then the Zuastia, who while not possessing any amazing traits in particular, were very reliable when it came to acting as the cavalry. So, these were all the enemies the Holy Kingdom had to be aware of, making it unsurprising that they wanted Ainz to help get rid of them. If what Ainz said before was to be taken seriously, then it was best to consider their numbers being staked out as they spoke. That being the case, it was likely Yaldabaoth wouldn't send more than he thought was necessary. A benefit to the Paladins since there was a good chance they wouldn't be facing Yaldabaoth's army in its entirety. The only problem was, would they have enough food to last until Yaldabaoth's assault, an issue the Paladins were already working on. The thing is, with every demi-human camp seconding as a storehouse filled with food in the form of prisoners, the Paladins knew they'd never win in a battle of whose supplies would last the longest. They couldn't eat demi-humans the same way demi-humans ate them. They could at least have the priests use magic to make food, but even if they expended all their mana in its entirety, it still wouldn't be enough to last everyone forever. So the sooner the siege came, the better. They just needed to work with the hand that they were given. So eventually everyone present would come to a conclusion and the meeting would end with some semblance of hope for what was to come next. That, however, didn't last long, as after only a week, they had less food than they desired, and when the time was seeming right to start heading south, the demi-human army would appear with a far greater force than any of them could have imagined. After this comes that essential scene I talked about in the last cut content, basically highlighting Ainz's despair and the plans Demiurge made with Caspond. The scene ended with Ainz telling Demiurge not to spare anyone, all because he couldn't come up with a single person he knew admired him. So that's when Volume 12 comes to an end, finally bringing us to the beginning of Volume 13. It's right now that the Holy Kingdom is in an incredibly tough position, and it's exactly where Demiurge wants them to be. You see, by having Caspond facilitate things on the Holy Kingdom side, Demiurge is effectively in control of both sides of the chessboard. This makes Caspond's reveal that much more impactful right here in the middle of the movie, since you get to see that Demiurge had seized control of the Holy Kingdom without anyone even knowing it. If it wasn't obvious by the way Caspond insisted certain plans be carried out, the whole thing was a masterful play highlighting how Demiurge leaves nothing up to chance. Remember, he only fights in battles he knows he's already won. Now, I was planning to continue on and talk about what would have been the next scene, but I've been really sick and recording this video has been difficult. I'm sure you could tell that my voice was pretty off for this one. So, I do apologize for cutting this video a bit short, but when I'm done recovering, we'll get back to our regular 20-minute ones. If you did like this video though, then leave a like, and if you want to see more, then be sure to subscribe. Until next time though, ciao.